Escaping Innsmouth. To me, The Shadow Over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft was always to be interpreted in a few ways. Firstly, there is the literal interpretation. Fishmen take over a New England town. That's it. Misses any sort of depth, and Lovecraft didn't write shallow stories, so I never take this interpretation seriously, though I can appreciate the premise would make for a cozy B-tier horror film, or a retro shooter, which the Japanese did with the Virtual Boy console game Innsmouth no Yakata. There is the interpretation which is more socio-political. Lovecraft's trip to a modernizing New York even back in the 1920s surely gave him some ideas as to how a place can lose its identity. In The Shadow Over Innsmouth, which I highly suggest you read, or else something bad could happen to you.
Some sad shit.
Zadok Allen started life in Innsmouth where he was a young boy. Later in his boyhood he witnessed the shadow fall over Innsmouth, that being the sea captain Obed Marsh, his loyalists and the Deep Ones taking over Innsmouth and massacring hundreds of people who opposed him, the remaining citizens falling into compliance and secrecy about what happened. Zadok Allen left Innsmouth to participate in the American Civil War, but then returned upon its conclusion. He never left and became the town drunk who eventually supplies the backstory of Innsmouth to the protagonist of Lovecraft's tale. One aspect of Zadok Allen's life bothered me greatly, and I almost dare to call it a flaw on Lovecraft's part. Why did Zadok Allen not simply leave Innsmouth? In the weird tale, he was free to roam the town as he pleased. He was not a prisoner. There were no border guards armed with Kalashnikovs to prevent him from leaving. Nothing like that. It never made sense to me, and then recently it did. I have sunk into an utter malaise, complemented by physical, mental, spiritual exhaustion and apathy, and this has been going on for a handful of years now, which kind of explains the stagnation of this channel. It was a poisonous routine which got me into this state, I think. My paying the bills job has me run dry to the point that it is all I do, and barely have any time for family, friends, or anything remotely like that. Many times, due to the season in Switzerland, during winter and autumn, I wake up when it is dark and I return home when it is dark. Including the obligational tasks one cannot avoid in life, I have maybe a couple hours left a day to myself. I understand due to cultural reasons this may not seem bad or wrong in the United States, and some people there really glorify work. To me, this is overkill, especially since this is just a job to pay the bills, not one I really give a shit about. Extreme burnout in the official clinical sense was what I was affected by, I found out. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I was just there, living, repeating, and when I could, numbing myself with mindless distractions which required no brain effort on my part, because concentrating on anything serious like writing, creating, or making a video essay was just tedious and unpleasant. As a creative person, an artistic person, not having time for my outlets of expression kills me inside, frankly. Not having the clarity of mind due to always being tired to even utilize these few hours properly filled me with a sense of guilt. I lost the desire to live in the sense of having any excitement or joy for life. But it isn't just being overworked. There is a spiritual fatigue as well. I live in Zurich, Switzerland, and it is truly my Innsmouth. You'll find online many lists putting Zurich at the top of world happiness, wealth, safety, and quality of life. In truth, I find this place clinically grey and as appealing as static, dead of soul, of life, inhabited by a people with no kinship to art, beauty, wit, or an easygoing nature, all features wholly incompatible with my own nature. In my opinion, because of mass immigration, specifically white-collar workers from surrounding European countries, let alone the ever-growing number of swarthy illegals who would fit into the horror at Red Hook nicely, there is no sense of unity here in Zurich. Everyone is just here to work. The mentality here is go to work, go buy your groceries, go home to your shiny apartment, repeat. There is no culture to really share anymore because everyone is on a different wavelength. Working in the airport, I can confirm that it is typical for people to leave Zurich on a Friday night and return on a Sunday night or a Monday morning. In other words, this is not a place in which people come to live. I would wager that Zadok Allen promised himself that tomorrow he'd make some effort to escape, to plan a move to a neighboring town, anywhere away from Innsmouth. But in the pain of daily existence, he did his best to find some level of numbness, and this numbness cut his legs out from under him. He became comfortably numb, as the song goes, right? It gave him enough reason not to leave. Zadok each day would rise in that rotting, oppressive atmosphere, the stink of fish, assaulting him from first consciousness, and he'd quickly find a way to numb himself, his choice of medicine being whiskey. He'd think of escape. However, perhaps he'd just sit on those rocks for a bit and sip the whiskey, and the calming ASMR effect of the waves, to use a modern term, would ease his muscles, and instead of discomfort and pain, he'd just feel nothing much. But with no energy, no clarity of mind, and no direction, nothing would change. There is also the factor that the father he spoke so warmly of in his narration to the protagonist of the story was there, his memory at least. No other place offered that. It was his home. To leave it would be unbearable for him. Lovecraft himself felt extreme attachment to his home at 454 Angel Street. Having to leave it was a traumatic experience for him and something he never really got over. I think in this modern age where there is a greater sense of rootlessness, one is more likely to move without too much emotional upheaval. But Zadok Allen's refusal probably comes from an older mentality, one that Lovecraft shared. The soil of your people is so integral to your identity that leaving is to basically die. This is surely another reason as to Zadok Allen choosing to remain in Innsmouth. To leave would admit total defeat to the Shadow. It isn't stubbornness or even aggression that is fueling him to not admit defeat, but rather that the horror of the total destruction of Innsmouth was too much to bear. As long as he lived untainted and of the original people, a tiny sliver of old Innsmouth remained. Its destruction would be his destruction, and while he was burned out, totally surrounded by the rot and sickness, he didn't want to lose his life, clearly as we see in the story where he runs away in an attempt of self-preservation from what is applied to be the sudden appearance of a full-blooded deep one in the harbor. What is the point of fleeing anyway? In Lovecraftian horror, you cannot generally escape the figure of horror in the story. While the deep ones, by their nature, are confined to the oceans, you'd think that it'd be safe if he had just moved to Omaha or Denver, pretty far from anything resembling an ocean. But the deep ones are just the tip of the iceberg of the horror that exists in Lovecraft's world. Given his ample time to think and to dwell on this, Zadok Allen figured, what's the point? These are the reasons I think that Zadok Allen didn't flee. This apathy and malaise overtook him, and the routine of life, it just cut his feet out from under him, and the shadow overtook him. This realization became quite depressing to me, and I understood Lovecraft a little bit better, I think. I started this video talking about a new way to interpret the Innsmouth tale. The literal fishman invasion angle, the more socio-political holy shit, we're getting swamped by savages angle, and now this malaise angle. Granted, I did focus on Zadok Allen, basically a sub-character of the story. However, I know I've come across a concrete interpretation here. Why not expand it to a society? Speaking as a Westerner, is it off-center to say that in our societies there is an ever-growing feeling of malaise and apathy to tolerate the intolerable? And the intolerable seems to be spreading, always, inch by inch. In other words, a shadow, in the Innsmouth sense, is taking over. There is an essay which I also had recently read, which has proven to be eerily accurate about society. Uncle Ted's Manifesto. FBI, open up! Instead of removing the conditions that make people depressed, modern society gives them antidepressant drugs. In effect, antidepressants are a means of modifying an individual's internal state in such a way as to enable him to tolerate social conditions that he would otherwise find intolerable. Increasingly, it seems that antidepressant medication is becoming a norm in many countries and has been like that for a long time now. While not everyone needs them or wants them, the effects of antidepressant medication are still what many humans seek by nature. Dopamine is the thing that we're all addicted to, really. Typically, it is a hormone which increases the sense of pleasure and happiness, and the effect is triggered by things such as exercising hard, being in the sun, having a healthy lifestyle, getting enough good sleep, having enough good sex, reaching goals and achievements that we've strived for. In short, it is the happy drug which comes as a reward to us from actions and stimuli. This, much to the horror of Uncle Ted, has been utilized by elements of society, for example, social media companies, marketing companies, and sex and pornography related industries to hook people into consuming any and everything which can be capitalized on for sales and thus profit. Just like Zadok with his whiskey, many people will binge watch some mindless shit on Netflix, lay in bed for a good hour or two flicking through shorts on TikTok or Instagram or whatever before sleeping, eating fast food garbage which leaves you satiated but quickly wanting more, solving loneliness by firing up the hub or paying some prostitute for her nudes and a sense of connection to a romantic partner. The effect is the same basically, isn't it? A comfortable numbness that keeps us passive. Another Uncle Ted quote. The system needs a population that is meek, non-violent, domesticated, docile, and obedient. It needs to avoid any conflict or disruption that could interfere with the orderly functioning of the social machine. As a result of this numbness, this apathy, this comfort from drip-fed dopamine, our societies have deformed. What was unthinkable a mere 20 or even 10 years ago is now just accepted. To tolerate the intolerable? What was Uncle Ted talking about here? Is it perhaps the decay of our freedoms, the laws which get snuck in, which never do a thing to increase liberties but always strip them? I hear in California you're not even allowed to have a gas lawnmower anymore. In the past, the United States started revolutions and mass protests when the British wanted to tax them just a few percent. However, just a few years ago, we were all locked up, forced to wear stupid masks, threatened with unemployment and exclusion from many aspects of society if we didn't take that shit in the syringe, which thankfully I never did. But it was all part of the plan, so nobody objected seriously.
You know what I noticed? Nobody panics when things go according to plan, even if the plan is horrifying.
Many even welcomed more and more boots to lick. In Switzerland, we were given the vote twice to ease restrictions, but both times the majority of the population decided to keep them. Is it that despite having social media everywhere connecting us, we live lonelier lives, have less sex and relationships, form less strong bonds as a community? Porn companies earn billions and utterly vapid and literal whores become icons to millions of men and aspirations to millions of young women. Is it that our nations are flooded by people who only seek to exploit and take and are wholly incompatible with the lifestyles and mentalities of native citizens, yet many natives still think it is a good thing and will shout you down for speaking up? A woman can be gang raped by subhumans in any European city, the news made public, and nobody does a damn thing because it is more comfortable to not care and easy to just move on to the next thing.
I think I seen a couple running that way.
Part and parcel. Or perhaps intolerable means working yourself ragged with little pay, but enough pay that you don't feel like a Mac worker wage slave, but not enough for true autonomy, with everything becoming more and more costly, so that just maintaining a home becomes a massive chore. Bit by bit, we are told these changes are good for us. Boldly, they can state things such as, "You will own nothing and you'll be happy." The shadow that has consumed Innsmouth spreads. I'm convinced of it. I sense it and see it every fucking day I wake up. The shadow can infect a geographical place and its people, but also a singular soul. It creeps slowly but surely, and you may not even sense it before it takes hold of you. It is vital that we do all we can and do our best to escape Innsmouth in every sense of the word, lest we are eventually destroyed. H.P. Lovecraft was a goddamn genius. There is nothing that will sway my opinion on this. His sensitivity, intelligence, and insight into the human animal, into societies, was impeccable, and his predictions for humanity many decades after his death are unfortunately often accurate. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the comment section below. Cheers.